You're listening to a CNA podcast.
2023 has been marked by a blazing buzzword, heatwave. Across continents such as Asia, Europe, North America, and Africa, a succession of heat waves has firmly gripped regions, shattering numerous temperature records. The toll of this heat inferno has been tragic, leading to a surge in fatalities and prompting health advisories worldwide. A number of people are confronting crushing conditions in unforgiving environments. Some even put their lives on the line to save others during sweltering heat waves. In our 3-part series, Surviving the Sizzle, we explore personal stories of commitment and resilience in the face of extreme heat and ways of keeping cool and safe. We're starting off with Chris Hardman, Chief Fire Officer at Forest Fire Management Victoria. He has more than 30 years' experience with Parks Victoria in Australia. As deadly wildfires become all too familiar and span continents due to rising temperatures and dry conditions, we shine the spotlight on Hardman and his team. All right, Chris, pleasure to have you on the program to talk about a very hot topic.
Yeah, thanks. I think taking the opportunity to talk about the wicked problem that climate change is always something I consider an important thing to do.
I think it'd be remiss of me to not first talk about wildfires that have been raging across the world, the most recent one being the Maui and also the British Columbia fires. As a person who knows too well what goes on the ground, what's your reaction to these fires?
These fires bring back some very painful memories for me. You know, I come from a jurisdiction that has suffered devastating wildfires. In 2009 in Victoria, I was part of the firefighting efforts around the Black Saturday fires, which was Australia's worst ever natural disaster, where 173 people lost their lives. And I have to say, the Maui fires sort of brought back all of those painful memories. I can readily imagine what that community is going through and how this will have an impact forever on them. And then looking at Canada, I was just fortunate enough to send 150 firefighters out to support in their bushfire response in Alberta and in British Columbia. Just got back and I had a look at the extent, and many millions of hectares have now been impacted. Half a dozen firefighters, again, tragically have lost their lives. The beautiful forests that have been impacted. And on their oil, gas and timber industry, we will need to calculate the cost of these fires beyond monetary and understand what climate change is doing to the frequency and intensity of fires.
Yeah, let's talk about that, the climate change. How does it really fit into the picture? How does it affect the fire risk on the ground, the threat of extreme fire behavior?
It is a global problem, but I can talk with authority in my own little patch here in Victoria, Australia. So what I've seen, we've had 4 mega fires in 20 years. In the previous 152 years, there were 2. So 2 in 152 years, 4 in 20 years. So when I say climate change is real and it's having an impact, there's some very clear numbers. So spring rain, which we rely on the rain in spring really to reduce the intensity of summer bushfires, since 1972 has reduced by 20%. And we've had a 40% increase in very high fire danger days. And we have more lightning, one of the primary causes of natural fire in our ecosystem. And over and above all of that, in all but a handful of the last 30 years, have been the hottest year on record, year on year on year.
Right.
And we are seeing our fires generate so much energy that they are connecting with the unstable atmosphere and creating these columns, draw up ash and embers and create their own lightning storms because of the weather effect that they have. And then every now and again, they get heavy, they collapse. And when they collapse, they have like a downburst effect and they can be very, very dangerous to firefighters or community members. So you can say what you want, but they're the facts. And those facts mean that we're having more severe fires that have a more significant impact on all of the values that we all care about.
So frequency and intensity changed over the years, as you mentioned. You also briefly mentioned heat. I mean, the heat has been the buzzword of 2023. As temperatures continue to rise, can you describe what it's like to be on the front lines, facing intense heat and risk? Just how hot can it get?
If you've got a raging head fire and you're anywhere close to that, long before the fire has hit you, you could be killed by radiant heat.
Oh, wow.
You see these pictures of fires along roadsides. That's not what a wildfire is. So human beings just cannot be anywhere close to these fires when they are at the fire front. What we do is we attack the flanks of the fires, because when the wind change turns around, that fire front may go from being 5 kilometres wide to 50 kilometres wide, and it becomes a firestorm. And so what you saw in Maui, what we saw in Victoria, it was really on the wind change where those large fires sweep across the landscape, eating up all of the fuel in front of them, and they can be devastating. It's really hard to describe in pictures what it's like, but it creates its own sound. It's almost like a rumbling sound, like you might get in an earthquake scenario. I will do everything in my power not to be that close, but I've heard it and in my career, and it is terrifying. And I can relate a little story that one of my female crew leaders in Gippsland in the 2019-20 bushfire season, and she was looking around her, and there were 4 major convective columns surrounding her. She's highly experienced, highly trained, but the thoughts deep in her mind were, I'm not sure if I'm going to get home tonight.
My goodness.
They were the thoughts going through her mind about whether this would be the last day that she saw. And many of the firefighters, they are trained. We do everything we can to make sure they're not in harm's way. But it's a scary place to be on occasion.
I can't imagine how tough that must have been. And it's quite a test for their skills and training as well. How do firefighters prepare themselves to face the increased risk on the front lines?
Well, they're there to look after each other. So they've got this real comradeship, the men and women in my team, and they rely on exceptional communications. They rely on good intelligence. We can track the weather and the weather changes. And for people to build resilience to risk, they have to be exposed to risk. They get to know what it feels like, what it smells like when things are not good. And the one thing that they know is that the primary job that they've got is to go home safe at the end of every shift. That is it.
Right.
There is no such thing as a hero here. I do not want them to put themselves in harm's way. They are in harm's way, but my preference would be for them to step back and keep themselves safe, which is what they know that they need to do. And that enables them to wake up the next day and get back out onto the fire line. As the chief of this organisation, I lost 3 firefighters in the 2019-20 season. And these sort of statistics roll off in the media, X number of firefighters were killed. But when you see the impact that it has on families, friends, loved ones, that every single plan, every bit of potential that these firefighters were going to have stops at that day. So there is nothing worth sacrificing your life.
So Chris, what sort of specialized training or equipment are needed to safely handle extreme heat conditions?
So our forest firefighters go through extensive training. So our seasonal firefighters even, so the people that come on every season, they learn wildfire behaviour. They learn about how to operate chainsaws, how to drive 4-wheel drive vehicles, how to navigate in the forested areas. They also go through specialist training, such as how to operate pumps. Occasionally we have people that rappel from aircraft, so the rappellers go through an extensive training capability to operate around aircraft, and dry firefighting techniques, so they learn how to do backburning operations. We don't often use water in our firefights. It's generally, quite often, we'll rake all the vegetation off so there's bare soil. Then they'll get a thing called a drip torch, which is just little drops of fire, and run along the edge and do backburning operations. That's how we remove the fuel from in front of the fire rather than put water on it. People see aircraft and they think that aircraft, the thing that puts fires out, aircraft do not put fires out ever. The aircraft will slow the spread of a fire, and then our firefighters get on the ground with bulldozers, create those mineral earth tracks, and then burn off those tracks and suppress the fires that way. So to stop a bushfire, you need human beings, You need bulldozers, you need people with hand tools and chainsaws. The aircraft, they assist in slowing the spread of those fires, but aircraft do not put out fires.
Hello, my name is Steve Lai.
And I'm Teresa Tang, and we are the hosts of CNA Correspondent,
A podcast that takes you to the heart of the work our correspondents do across the globe.
from China's COVID response to the childcare center massacre in Thailand.
And from the fall of Najib Razak to the rise of Anwar Ibrahim as Malaysia's Prime Minister.
We speak to the people at the reporting front lines.
So if you want to know how the biggest global stories unfold, make sure you follow or subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts.
As wildfires become more unpredictable, more intense, have there been changes to firefighting strategies, like thinking, planning, or actions?
We've got some amazing modelling tools. So with the power of technology, we use computer modelling tools that can simulate how fires will move through the landscape. So as soon as there's a lightning ignition, there will be an immediate prediction through a computer-based model that will say this fire is going to do this in the next 24 hours. So the modelling has really helped shape firefighting strategy, but also the understanding of fire behaviour. So if we know what the fuel type, the fuel arrangement, the slope, the topography, all of those things I spoke about before, be a power line, it might be a gas plant, then we'll go into asset protection mode and we will start then to build containment lines and try and protect those critical infrastructure or those townships. So it will depend on the modelling, the mapping, utilising satellite information and all of these technologies that we use to help shape our firefighting strategy. So it's more efficient now than it's ever been based on good use of technology.
So how can communities and individuals play a more proactive role in preventing wildfires during heatwave events?
That's a fantastic question. Being careful about what you do on your own property. So, for instance, if you're out camping in the forests, be careful with your campfires. Never leave them unattended. If you leave an unattended campfire, 10% of all of our forest fires come from unattended campfires. So they're all fully avoidable. People that are working with machinery out in the country areas, in the farms, with angle grinders or welding or any of those sorts of things, can inadvertently start a small fire which turns into a big fire. So people understanding when the fire risk is high is critical. Now we in the industry, we know when we have a high fire risk day, and we shouldn't assume that everybody in the community has the same level of understanding, the same sort of knowledge. So we've got to make sure that we have a very strong community awareness and education campaign. The other thing is prepare their own properties. So if you live within, say, 300 metres to a kilometre of the edge of a large forest, then you're at a much higher risk of being impacted by a forest fire. And it's how you prepare your property. You know, have you mowed your grass? Have you cleaned out your gutters? Have you removed all of the combustible material from around your house? Is your firewood not stacked up against the house because it's close to the back door, but it's stored away from the house, so if it does become impacted by fire, it's not going to burn your house down. And you have a plan about what you're going to do during a bushfire or a wildfire, and have a really good plan and stick to the plan.
Certainly there's an urgent need for collective action, not only from frontline heroes like yourselves, but community and individuals as well. As a seasoned wildfire fighter, how do you see the future of firefighting evolving with the ongoing challenges of rising temperatures and climate-related factors?
Yeah, it's with all of the doom and gloom that we've spoken about, I actually believe that there are things we can do. To me, it's spending more on prevention. It's easier to put a small fire out than it is a big fire. So having rapid, aggressive, thorough, determined sort of first attack is a good thing to do. And to utilise aircraft and other technology to hold fires until you can get ground forces there to suppress them. So we bring together prevention, prescribed fire, exceptional firefighting capability, good roads and strategic fire break networks. All of those things can come together to mitigate the impact of fires, but What is really important is that it will need every person that lives in a jurisdiction that's impacted by wildfire to learn that they have to learn to live with it. So living with fire is a part of our future. And to do that, people need to educate and inform themselves. So the more people know, the better off they'll be.
Speaking of the future, when you think about the next generation of wildfire fighters, what concerns do you have for them as they face the potential consequences of a warming planet, and what would you like to tell them?
Well, I'm 62 years old, getting a bit old, long in the tooth now, and this is why I'm an agency chief and no longer on the tools. But for me, I've spent my time in front of the fire line, and I look at the young people today and I think they're exceptional. I think they are dedicated, committed, strong physically and mentally. I'm really excited about the number of women that are getting involved in firefighting.
Sure.
And I actually think with the science, with the technology, with adapting to climate change, I think that they can do the job, but it is a high-risk job. And if we can keep people informed and have people aware of what the potential negative outcomes of these catastrophic fires can be, I think that the young generation of firefighters will do well into the future.
Chris, your insights truly highlight the untold stories behind the scenes of firefighting and the impact of the warming planet. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks to my guest, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Now, do remember to like and subscribe to this podcast so you know when the new episode drops. Leave us a message on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to let us know what you think. The team behind this podcast is Cyan Nguyen, Jacqueline Chen, Joanne Chen, Tiffany Ang, Crispina Robert, and I'm Julie Yu signing off.